the entire delegation from the United States, but also every athlete and staff member, volunteer, everybody within Tokyo 2020 is being treated as if they're unvaccinated. And I think that is the safest way of treating this Olympics. And that involves not giving special accommodations to those who are vaccinated, and essentially saying everybody should be physically distancing, everybody should be wearing their face mask, everybody should be washing their hands. Because while vaccination reduces your risk of getting infected, people can get infected even when they're vaccinated, and they can transmit even when they're vaccinated. So the best thing to do is to assume everybody is at risk, and therefore reduce that risk by implementing all of the COVID mitigation measures that we know work.
Great, thanks Eddie, and it's good to see you. Yeah, Rule 50, we actually were talking about that before COVID. I remember sitting in Thomas Bach's office pre-COVID and talking about the fact that the athletes really have been trying to raise their voices and looking for us in many different ways, in governance and all across the board, ways for athletes to express themselves, and part of that manifests itself in the right to protest. So we began those discussions. Clearly we have not always been in identical positions on that, but I think as we have tried to be more specific in the US about what we would define as respectful protests and what we would allow, I'm very happy to say that I think the IOC has tried to find ways to loosen up the rules a bit. You've seen them make some changes, allowing respectful protests prior to engagement in competition. So I think progress is being made, and I think the athletes are the ones who are to be congratulated for really continuing to remind us that they are not just athletes. They are not just here to be the cogs in the wheel. They are human beings. In the case of our athletes, they're American citizens who were raised on the value of freedom of speech. And we very much support our athletes' right to speak, particularly on issues of racial and social justice, which has been such a tremendous issue of importance in our country over the last year or two. We have reminded our athletes that the rules we had for the trials are different than the rules that are in force at the Games here. The IOC Rule 50 is the rule in force, and for the Paralympic Games, Rule 2.2 is in force. We've been clear about what our response will be to particular types of protests that fall within what we consider to be respectful expressions in support of the values of racial and social justice. And we've also let our athletes know that if they should make a decision to protest, they do have to remember that they are under the auspices of the IOC rules for these games. So I think we've had very good and constructive dialogue, and I think history will show that this has really been an important period of athlete empowerment and the beginnings of some important shifts in ensuring that athletes can speak out on the issues that are values-based and that are part of the Olympic and Paralympic movements without fear of retribution. Let me take a stab at the second part of your question, Christine, and then Sarah can comment too. In terms of what keeps us up at night, probably the short answer is everything. You're hearing, it seems very serious up here because the weight of ensuring that we are, first of all, not endangering our host nation and certainly not endangering our athletes is very heavy on all of us who work on this. And the challenges that have been presented are really so different from the things that we normally worry about. We still have to worry about all the normal things we worry about in competition, but there's a whole new layer, and the science has been changing all along the way, and we've had to adjust. And I think, you know, I guess if I could say what my hope is, someone asked about, I think Anne asked about the emotion. I think it's going to be a delayed gratification in a sense for everyone if all goes the way that we hope and expect that it will. When we really can see that really the memory of this game should not be that it was the COVID games, it should be that it was a games that really showed the world the resilience of humanity, that gave hope at a time when the entire world needs hope. And I think as we start to see some of these competitions over the next few days, and we're reminded that these are the best in the world, these are people who can achieve things that are unbelievable, I think the joy of watching them will begin to rise. And so I think some of the somber attitude that you're hearing from us is that concern and that feeling of responsibility to carry this forward. But I have every hope and expectation that by the end of these games and the end of the Paralympics, we will all say, boy, did we need that.